March 15th, 1984, 9:47 p.m. Clive Davis's Upper East Side penthouse. Whitney Houston sat quietly in the corner, nursing white wine and watching Manhattan's music elite debate vocal superiority with the arrogance only money and education could buy. She was 21, unknown, recently signed to Arista just 3 months ago after Clive heard her sing backing vocals at a session. Nobody knew her name yet. The other guests saw her as just another pretty face, probably some executive's girlfriend trying to look important at an industry party. But what happened in the next 37 minutes would shatter every classical music assumption about church-trained voices. Because when the most respected opera coach on the East Coast decided to publicly humiliate a young gospel singer from Newark, Whitney's response didn't just leave everyone speechless. It revolutionized how the music industry understood vocal genius forever. And it all started when Helena Morrison made the fatal mistake of confusing quiet confidence for ignorance. Helena Morrison entered the party like she owned every note ever sung, her Hermes heels clicking against the marble floor with the precision of a metronome. At 52, she was Manhattan's most feared vocal coach, the woman who could make or break careers with a single assessment. Metropolitan Opera stars like Luciano Pavarotti, Grammy winners like Barbra Streisand, Lincoln Center legends whose names adorn theater marquees, all had trained under her $500 per lesson guidance, many begging for appointments that she granted like papal blessings. Her waiting list stretched 6 months because Helena Morrison didn't just teach technique. She demolished inferior singers with scientific precision, then rebuilt them into machines of vocal perfection. She wore her silver hair in an immaculate chignon, her navy Chanel suit speaking of serious money and even more serious credentials. The diamond brooch on her lapel was a gift from Maria Callas herself, a fact Helena mentioned regularly. Behind her tortoise-shell glasses, her pale blue eyes assessed every voice in the room like a composer evaluating instruments for a symphony. Most came up wanting. Tonight, Helena was particularly fired up about contemporary music's technical inadequacies, her voice carrying across Clive's elegant apartment like a lecture hall pronouncement. She moved through the gathering of 30-odd classical musicians, industry professionals and music critics, holding court near the $150,000 Steinway grand piano, explaining to anyone who'd listen why gospel singers were fundamentally flawed specimens of vocal development. The apartment itself was a shrine to musical achievement. Original sheet music from Gershwin covered the walls. A first edition signed copy of Strange Fruit sat framed near the bar. Clive's collection of platinum records caught the light from crystal chandeliers, casting rainbow patterns across white leather furniture where industry titans debated the future of American music. Whitney occupied a cream-colored sofa near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. From her vantage point, she could see the lights of the city below and hear every word of Helena's increasingly passionate lecture about vocal superiority. She'd been nursing the same glass of Chablis for over an hour, partly because she wasn't much of a drinker, and partly because she was absorbing every conversation, every musical theory, every criticism floating through the smoke-filled air like a student in an advanced masterclass. These church singers, Helena declared to her captive audience of classical musicians and industry professionals, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had deconstructed thousands of voices over 3 decades. They prioritize raw emotion over disciplined technique. They oversing every passage, strain their instruments beyond sustainable limits, and develop compensatory habits that would destroy any classically trained voice within months of professional use. Several producers nodded thoughtfully, wine glasses paused halfway to lips. Helena warmed to her favorite subject, her hands gesturing with the precision of a conductor. The fundamental problem is anatomical ignorance, she continued, moving to the piano and striking middle C. Church singers rely on emotional intensity to carry phrases that should be supported by proper diaphragmatic breathing and resonance placement. They create dangerous pressure on the vocal folds, leading to nodes, polyps, and premature vocal deterioration. I've seen it hundreds of times. A jazz producer near the bar called out, "But what about the passion? Doesn't that count for something?" Helena turned toward him with the patient smile of a professor addressing a particularly slow student. Passion without technique is like driving a Ferrari without brakes. Impressive for a moment, then catastrophic. These gospel singers mistake volume for power, strain for strength. Take these melismatic runs so popular in black church music. Helena continued, playing a simple scale on the piano to demonstrate. They sound complicated to untrained ears, but they're actually quite simple. Emotional embellishments without harmonic sophistication. Any properly trained singer could master them in weeks with proper instruction. It's musical fast food, immediately satisfying but ultimately nutritionless. Whitney looked up from her wine glass, feeling something cold settle in her stomach. She'd heard this criticism before, usually from people who'd never set foot in a black church, who'd never experienced the spiritual power driving gospel vocals, who mistook passionate expression for technical ignorance. But hearing it here, in this room of supposed music experts, with such casual dismissal of her entire musical heritage, made her hands tighten around the crystal stem. She thought about her mother, Whitney Houston, whose voice had graced stages from Las Vegas to Lincoln Center. She thought about Aretha Franklin, whose technique was flawless enough to make any opera singer weep with envy. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught 3 generations of women to sing with both power and precision in the little church in Newark, where music was prayer made audible. I've heard church singers attempt classical pieces, Helena continued, accepting a fresh glass of wine from a waiter who moved through the party like a silent ghost. And while the emotion exists, certainly, the technical foundation is completely inadequate. They simply lack the systematic training necessary for sophisticated vocal literature. It's the difference between finger painting and fine art. The comparison hit Whitney like a slap. Her musical education hadn't come from conservatories or expensive private lessons. It had come from her mother's patient instruction, from Sunday morning services where every note mattered because it carried the congregation's hopes and prayers, from late-night sessions where Whitney Houston had taught her daughter that technique and soul weren't opposing forces but dance partners in perfect harmony. The room quieted as Whitney stood slowly and walked toward the piano. Despite being the youngest person present by at least 10 years, conversation stopped entirely. Everyone sensed something building. "Excuse me," Whitney said quietly, her voice carrying warm southern tones. "I couldn't help overhearing your discussion about vocal technique." Helena turned with polite interest, taking in Whitney's youth and casual appearance, clearly not recognizing anyone significant. "I was wondering," Whitney continued respectfully, "what you consider the most challenging technical aspect of classical singing." Helena smiled, pleased to find someone interested in serious vocal discussion. "Well, there are several elements, but I'd say maintaining consistent tone quality and pitch accuracy across wide ranges, particularly executing large interval jumps. Most singers, even trained ones, struggle maintaining technique when moving through multiple octaves." "How many octaves?" Whitney asked, genuinely curious. "A truly skilled soprano should navigate cleanly through at least 3 octaves, Helena stated with the confidence of established fact. "But that requires years of proper training, developing breath support and resonance placement necessary to maintain tone quality throughout entire ranges." Whitney nodded thoughtfully. "Would you mind demonstrating?" Helena looked pleased. She moved to the piano, found middle C, and began a carefully controlled scale, moving methodically upward. Her technique was flawless, each note perfectly placed and supported, demonstrating disciplined training that built her reputation. She reached her range's top, sustained a beautiful high note for several seconds, then descended with the same methodical precision. The room applauded appreciatively. Helena's demonstration was technically perfect, showcasing decades of training and absolute mastery of classical vocal principles. "That was beautiful," Whitney said sincerely. "Your technique is incredible." "Thank you," Helena replied, clearly pleased. "It takes years developing that kind of control and consistency." Whitney moved closer to the piano. "I grew up singing in church. We probably learn things differently than formal training." Helena nodded with polite interest toward folk music or amateur traditions. "Church music has its place, lots of passion and emotional expression, but quite different from serious vocal study." "I'm curious," Whitney said, her voice still gentle but carrying something that made Clive Davis stop his conversation and move closer. "Could I try that exercise?" Helena looked surprised. "The 3-octave range. It's quite challenging without proper training. You might strain your voice attempting something you haven't prepared for systematically." Whitney smiled with quiet confidence. "I'll be careful." But what happened next shattered everything Helena believed about vocal development and training. Whitney placed her hand lightly on the piano and found the starting note Helena had used, but instead of beginning immediately, she closed her eyes as if listening to something only she could hear. When she opened them, there was peaceful focus that suggested she was drawing from sources Helena had never accessed. Whitney began to sing. The first note emerged with warmth and richness that immediately distinguished it from Helena's controlled classical tone. It wasn't just technically perfect, it carried emotion, history, the weight of generations of voices that had transformed pain into hope through sound's alchemy. As Whitney moved up the scale, something extraordinary began happening. Instead of Helena's methodical progression, Whitney began weaving notes together with melismatic runs learned at her mother's side, but executed with precision, revealing complete mastery of every technical principle Helena had mentioned. The room fell completely silent as Whitney's voice soared through the first octave, then the second, each note not just perfectly pitched but invested with emotional meaning that transformed technical exercise into something approaching prayer. Her breath support was flawless, her resonance placement instinctive, her intonation absolutely perfect. But she wasn't finished. As Whitney approached the third octave, where most singers would show strain, where vocal cords begin to rebel against the demands of range and power, her voice seemed to open up even more. Notes flowed with impossible ease, each one more beautiful than the last, building towards something transcending everything. Helena understood about vocal production and physiological limitations. The guests pressed closer to the piano, wine glasses forgotten, conversations abandoned. A classical cellist near the window found herself holding her breath. A jazz pianist by the bookshelf stopped mid-sentence. Even the catering staff had paused in their duties, silver trays balanced in their hands as they listened to something none of them had ever heard before. When Whitney reached what should have been the exercise's top, the note Helena had sustained so beautifully, she didn't stop. Instead, she continued climbing, her voice moving into ranges Helena had only heard from the world's greatest sopranos, but with power and freedom that seemed to violate every principle of vocal strain and technical limitation. Helena found herself leaning forward, mouth slightly open, watching something that challenged everything she'd spent her career believing about vocal development. This wasn't just talent. This wasn't just good technique learned through alternative methods. This was something else entirely, something suggesting possibilities Helena had never considered. Whitney's voice crested at a note so high and pure it seemed to transform the room itself, a sound carrying not just perfect pitch but spiritual weight, the kind of musical expression reminding everyone present why they'd fallen in love with music originally. Then, with control-defying explanation, she began descending, weaving melody into patterns incorporating gospel, classical, and something entirely original. When she finished, returning to the same middle cease where she'd begun, the room remained completely silent for what felt like minutes. Helena stared at Whitney with complete bewilderment, as if she'd just witnessed something contradicting fundamental physics laws. "Where?" Helena asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you learn to do that?" Whitney looked genuinely puzzled. "Learn what?" "That range, that control, that." Helena searched for words containing what she'd just heard. I've trained singers for 30 years. I've worked with some of the world's most gifted voices. What you just did shouldn't be possible without decades of systematic training." Whitney shrugged gently, the same casual gesture she might have made if someone complimented her dress. "I've been singing since I could talk. My mother taught me, and her mother taught her. I guess it's just how we learn in church." Helena walked closer, studying Whitney's face as if looking for signs of technical knowledge explaining what she'd witnessed. "But the breath support, the resonance placement, the way you maintain tone quality throughout that entire range, those are advanced technical concepts taking years to master. I don't really think about those things when I sing," Whitney said honestly. "I just listen to what the song needs and try to give it that." "Listen to what?" Helena asked, genuinely confused. Whitney considered the question as if it had never occurred to her that other people might not understand. "The music tells you where it wants to go. You just have to get out of your own way and let it happen." Helena had spent her entire career believing music was a language that could be learned and controlled through study. Whitney was suggesting it was more like breathing, something natural happening if you stopped thinking long enough to hear what was already there. For the rest of the evening, Helena found herself in conversations with Whitney, asking questions she'd never asked before, not about technique or theory, but about music's source itself, where musical ideas came from, whether understanding music intellectually helped or hindered the creation process. Whitney never argued with Helena's theories, never defended her approach, never claimed to be better or smarter or more sophisticated. She just answered questions with the same gentle honesty she'd brought to her singing, revealing musical understanding depths transcending everything Helena had learned in conservatories and textbooks. When people began leaving around midnight, Helena approached Clive Davis. "Who is that girl?" she asked. "Whitney Houston." Clive replied with a knowing smile, suggesting he knew exactly what Helena had experienced. "Sissy Houston's daughter. I just signed her. That voice is going to change everything." Helena nodded slowly, her voice barely audible over the lingering silence that seemed to hang in the expensive air. "I've been teaching voice for 30 years, Clive. I thought I understood what was possible with proper training. She just showed me there are things that can't be taught, only discovered." In months that followed, Helena found herself teaching differently. Instead of starting with technical exercises, she would sometimes ask students to simply listen, to feel for what music wanted before analyzing how to achieve it. She never abandoned rigorous classical training, but began understanding it as one pathway to musical truth, rather than the only pathway. Years later, when Whitney's debut album topped charts worldwide, Helena watched the music video for "I Wanna Dance with Somebody" in her studio. When Whitney hit those impossible high notes, Helena smiled and shook her head in amazement. That young woman had taught her something, influencing everything she would teach afterward, that the greatest music happened when knowledge and intuition danced together, technical precision serving emotional truth. It was a lesson that could only be taught by someone who embodied it so completely they didn't even know they were teaching. The classical voice teacher had challenged Whitney to prove her technical knowledge. Instead, Whitney had revealed forms of musical intelligence transcending everything Helena had learned in decades of formal study. Sometimes the greatest teachers are those who don't even know they're teaching. That night in Clive Davis's penthouse, Helena Morrison learned that true musical mastery isn't about controlling the voice. It's about surrendering to it, about trusting something larger than technique alone. Whitney Houston, without trying to prove anything, showed a room full of professionals what happened when technique and soul became one voice. The church girl had hit the octaves, but more than that, she'd revealed that music at its highest level isn't something you do, it's something you become. In the years that followed, Helena would tell this story to every new student who walked into her West 57th Street studio.
She would describe the night a young woman from Newark taught her that there are forms of musical knowledge that can't be found in textbooks or technique manuals, that the greatest artists don't just master their instruments, they disappear into them completely. And sometimes late at night when her students had gone home, Helena would sit at her studio piano and try to recreate those impossible runs Whitney had sung so effortlessly. But no matter how perfect her technique, no matter how precise her breath support, something was always missing. The something that only comes from a lifetime of singing, like your very soul depends on it.